Plugins of the week come from two companies, Savant Audio Labs and Relab Development. Their individual emulations of the Quantec QRS are the subject matter of this plugin, dare I say a plugin shootout. I don't often do plugin shootouts. I think sometimes it's unfair to do comparisons, especially with vintage gear, because they get different units. They're going to sound different quality. And then, in the end, it's a matter, I guess, of which one sounds best, not which one sounds most like the original. What we have here is an interesting kind of thing because I was working on a project actually here as part of the live stream every Wednesday. You can get to by mixingwithmike.com. That's a free live class where I do mixing, answer questions, and do tons of other stuff there, mix demonstrations. And we're mixing a song where we have horns, and I thought, gee, I need a QRS, and I didn't have one. That's what I wanted, and it turned out that Savant Audio Labs had just come out with one, which is the bottom one here. So I picked it up, did a demo, and bought it 30 seconds later. It's like, I love this thing. And then a couple days later, Relab released Quantex, which is their version of the exact same reverb. Two different approaches here, and I wanted to do a comparison of them, right? But let's just kind of do a quick thing. So the Quantec QRS reverb is a 1980s reverb. So it came out in 1982, and the company was pretty active until about 1995. And essentially what it is was a 2-input, 4-output. So it would give you actually a quad reverb. So the outputs 3 and 4 would actually be two separate outputs, give you a different sound. And what I found here with the two emulations of it is that, well, what was so special about this, let me sort of, finish my thought here, was that instead of doing the sort of algorithmic reverb with a lot of modulation, which is the way that most of the other companies would sort of make up for what was missing with digital delays, just lots of them. What these guys did is they German company, they went through and they really focused on room modes and room resonances and built reverb pockets around that with a bunch of different room sizes. So what you had is seven selectable room sizes from 1 cubic meter up to 1 million cubic meters. So it's pretty broad, and so all the graduations in between there. And then you would have adjustments for reverb time and all of that sort of stuff. There are a couple of unique features here. The Savant Audio Labs version, which is the bottom one, actually went through and really stayed true to the original unit, including the ability to freeze the reverb, which was a whole series of button pushes to make it happen. Relab really focused on the sound and making it exactly the same as a golden unit, QRS. So we'll do a little bit of comparison. They're both very good in their own ways, and I'll explain. So from the original unit, 2 ins, 4 outs. Now what they do here is they give you outputs 3 and 4, right? So you have the separate outputs, and so you can actually split it out and do like a quad reverb, which is kind of cool. So the Relab did not do that. They didn't focus on that. Essentially, what we have are well, let's start with the reverb time section because that's where we'll primarily be doing it here. You set the size, the room size, and that will affect the available options for the reverb time. And it's sort of weird. So the way that this works, just like the unit, is you have a kind of data knob in the middle. And once you select it, you can go all the way pretty fast from one setting to another. That works well for the delay times. The room sizes are 1, 10, 10 to the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, right? So you kind of go through those options. You can adjust as a multiplier for high-end reverb and low-end reverb, and then you have the total reverb time here, right? So you can crank it up depending upon the room size. Like if I make it 10 seconds here, if I go all the way up, it could be to the biggest size. It can make it 100. I can make it like 100 or 90 seconds. I think it's up to 100 seconds on the original unit. I could be wrong about that. And then as you go down, you can see that it moves it down in size. So we have that there. Here there's a reflection, a single delay reflection, which you could add in a separate volume control for that. That only goes to outputs 1 and 2 on the original unit. The second two outputs do not have that delay built into it. Then there's a pre-delay for the reverb and then the reverb level. So what they added over here, which is not on the original has storage for presets. There were like 8 presets that were part of the original unit, and you could store your own. And actually what they've done here, which is great, is to bring the factory programs that would come with it, and then a bunch of other presets that you could add on top of that, which is kind of cool. The original unit operated at a 20 kilohertz sampling rate. So basically what they did is they had a hard roll-off at 8K. And so it would run down there. So it effectively cuts off at 10 kilohertz, but they have the hard roll-off at 8K. You can expand that here on this. They give you the option to go up to 20K, although it mostly sounds best with it at 10 kilohertz. So that's the basics of it there. The infinite reverb thing, or the freeze reverb thing, is just a matter of capturing, sending it to freeze mode, and muting it, and then hitting the enter button and holding it for as long as you want to capture the reverb. And then when you let it go, it will just freeze and kind of hold on to it. And there's an enhance mode. The enhance mode is basically like early reflections. And it doesn't add the early reflections into the reverb. It replaces the reverb with early reflections. So this is like a 1980s version of early reflections, something that, you see in algorithmic reverbs all the time. They're either included with the actual reverb algorithm with no separate control, as in most units, or they don't have them at all. Here, you could just operate it separately, which is kind of cool. So the different room sizes will give you those, just sort of immediate reflections without the longer reverb time. So the mixer over here gives you the direct level. So that would be the input signal fed to the output. Sometimes the direct is confusing because direct would be source sound, and then however far the mic is, that would be the direct level, but that's not what it is here. First reflection level, delay there, and then the reverb level and the main output level. Now, what Relab did is they sort of separated out the enhancement section where it's a button here. What they've done is, which is really cool, is they've made it a whole separate section which you could then mix in independently. So you can operate the two of them at the same time. Otherwise, it gives you all the same basic features with the 7 different room sizes. So you have all those settings here. The multiplier for high frequency reverb and low frequency reverb. What they did add in here was a modulation. That doesn't exist on the original. It's like it's Relab. They have like an 8-pole chorus effect or something like that it adds onto it. So you can blend that in to sort of, detail out the reverb tail a bit. You have control over the bandwidth, so they do the same thing with the 8K bandwidth. It allows you to go up to 16K or go downward. So this gives you more options in terms of the bandwidth control. Pre-delay, same. The delay signal, the same. And, they just dedicate this as your reverb time control. So basically that's it. No separate outputs. That was sort of in the information online in the manual. It sort of vaguely gives you some sense, like you can look at it here and somehow have control over it. There's no indication of how to do that. I don't see any documentation for how to separate it out. The plugin doesn't have 2-in, 4-out options, so it's not like you put it on the quad track or output it as quad. So I'm not exactly sure what that's all about, or whether they are mixing those outputs in along with the stereo ones, or whether you're just getting the left and right. I have no idea. So anyway, it would, if you're going to show the meter, give me some control over it. I think that would be my one bit of my one complaint there. Okay, so those are the two things. Now let's get to the basic comparison. So what I did was I set up a couple of comparisons here. So this is the Relab. The Relab is the first one, and this is the This is the Savant Audio Labs version. And so what I have them on here is, this is on a horn section. So I'm just gonna move this up here a little bit just so I have some controls over here. So I have it soloed. So what we'll have is just one of them, right? Here would be the Relab. This would be the Savant Audio Labs. Let's start with the Relab version. So what I did was I started with a default room and I made the settings identical, right? So I matched it for this. I actually I adjusted the settings here, and then I duplicated those settings up on the Relab, and just to see which one sounds better, what they sound like. So first, let's just show what it is dry. Right, and so let's do the Relab for the first line. It's repeated, and then I'll do the second line with the Savant. Right, so overall, they both sound really good. They're slightly different. There's a little bit of a warmer kind of character to the Relab. Sometimes I like that. Sometimes I don't. In this case, I think I prefer that. A little bit of the warmness. There's a little bit of an edginess to the Savant, which I liked less. But actually, again, both very good to me. Let's go over here. I just have a vocal. Do a vocal, and let me just close that out and set that up here. All right, so this is the same thing. The first one is the Relab. Second one is the Savant. Let's have a listen here. So this is a different setup here. Linear here. I basically dialed in a setting on one of them and duplicated the settings on the other. So in this case, it's not using the separate enhance mode. We're ignoring that for the time being.
Don't you point your energy with your lack of sympathy.
All right, let's listen to this line with the Relab.
Don't you point your energy with your lack of sympathy.
Again, a nice warmth to it. Let's say the Savant.
Don't you point your energy with your lack of sympathy.
Right. So again, like a very similar, you know, obviously it's duplicating the settings. I just want to see how much alike they are. I mean, it could just be whatever unit or units that they had were just that much different from each other. Now, they did make algorithmic changes to it over the course of its life. So each one from like 1982 to, you know, to the 90s, they were not all exactly the same. There were some subtle changes apparently in the programming that were done for each. Again, it appears that the Savant Audio Labs has a little bit more edge on the top. And all right, so there's that one there. I just wanted to show off the drums a little bit here. Let's see, got the drums. Let's listen to this. So, it's interesting here because in this case, the Savant Audio Labs sounds warmer in this instance with the drums than the Quantex does, the Relab version. So there's a lot actually, there's a very close similarities. Now it's just a matter of what you like to do in terms of whether you want to stay to the original and the way that it's set up. I would recommend this one for sure. For that, the Savant. Also, you get a different setting here. Like just check out the difference between pattern 1, 2, and 3, 4. And the cool thing about this is like you can take this. So let's just say that I duplicate this all together. Take the secondary output here, make that output 3 and 4, keep this as 1 and 2, maybe do little roll off on the top end. So that actually is really cool because it gives you an additional option that you wouldn't normally have, just making that like a quad reverb. Here on the Relab, if I kind of focus on this a little bit, the extra thing that I like here is having the enhancement section or the early reflection section. What they do is they have a separate pre-delay for it, and they have this control they call feedback time and level. And what you more or less need to understand about it is the higher this number is up, the more aggressive, forceful the early reflection pattern is going to be, and slightly more dense. It'll be a little bit longer, which you'll hear that if depending upon the size room you have set up. But let's listen to this. Or to get more density in the reflections that come back is essentially what happens there. So now if I mix the reverb, and if I felt like that was a little muddy, I can also pull back on the low end reverb time. So essentially what you have is a separate early reflection control and reverb control, and that enhancement really allows you to kind of define the depth and the space field. And to me, that's the selling point for the Relab version. I think it's interesting that in some cases I've found the Savant Audio Labs will sound warmer, richer, fuller sounding. It did that like that with the drums. And in some cases the Relab will kind of give it, and that's that density, that's that sort of sound of the original unit. There was like a certain palpableness to the density and the sense of space, which was the whole idea behind it. A super cool one, both of them actually. This one I really like for this. So because I'm a plug-in junkie, I have both. I saw the Relab version. It's like, oh no, I'm going to buy that too. And now I have both, and I'm still kind of feeling out what they're both really good for. But in my opinion, definitely both worth checking out, and whatever one you attach to is maybe personal taste. Because they each have their own things, which are super cool. I love that quad output, but I also love on the Relab side of things the separate control on the enhanced mode. So check it out. Both worth definitely checking out, especially if you're familiar with the QRS reverb from the 1980s, the hardware unit. All right, that's it. Mixing with Mike. Plugins of the week: Savant Audio Labs and Relab, their own versions of the Quantec QRS.